Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing fabulously well. While I work on new episodes and also to change things up, I am thrilled to share this conversation I had with Toni Okamoto and Michelle Kane on their podcast, Plant Powered People. Michelle and Toni are forces to be reckoned with, both individually as well as what they do together. Michelle Kane is the founder of World of Vegan. She's a content creator, a passionate advocate for making vegan living easy and inspiring. Toni Okamoto is the founder of Plant Based on a Budget. She's the author of several cookbooks focused on affordable, accessible vegan meals. And together, they co-authored the Friendly Vegan Cookbook, and they co-host the Plant Powered People podcast. I love alliteration. I love the name of their podcast. And on that podcast, they help people embrace vegan living with ease and joy and compassion. But more than that, I am honored to call them my very good longtime friends. I so enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do as well. Don't forget to follow Plant Powered People podcast, as well as Food for Thought podcast. And for more inspiration and information on living compassionately, you can subscribe to my Substack, pick up your copy of A Year of Compassion, and of course, check out my upcoming all-inclusive vegan trips. All of this can be found at joyfulvegan.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Plant Powered People podcast. I'm Michelle Kane, founder of World of Vegan.
And I'm Toni Okamoto, founder of Plant Based on a Budget and Food Sharing Vegan.
On this show, we talk with experts, thought leaders, and inspiring people from around the world to empower you, dear listener, to learn, explore, and evolve in a kind, sustainable, and healthy direction, all while eating the most delicious food and living your best life.
We are beyond thrilled to welcome back Colleen Patrick-Goudreau for her fourth appearance on our podcast. Over the years, Colleen has become our resident expert in all things compassion, and honestly, so much more than that. She's someone we deeply respect, someone who continually inspires us with her clarity, her courage, and wisdom, and someone we're lucky enough to call a very devoted and caring friend.
If we can have her every season, Colleen, if you will come every season, I would want that. She's just so good. Colleen is a renowned speaker, educator, and author who has been guiding people toward living more compassionately for over 2 decades. She's the author of multiple influential books, including The Joy of Vegan Baking, which was my first vegan cookbook, and Toni's first vegan cookbook, Joyful Vegan, the 30-Day Vegan Challenge, and she's known for making complex ethical and nutritional topics incredibly accessible, practical, and deeply moving. She's also the host of the long-running podcast Food for Thought, which was also the first podcast I ever listened to. Today, we're celebrating the release of her newest book, A Year of Compassion, a 52-week guide to living more mindfully, ethically, and joyfully. In this episode, we explore some of the themes from the book, including how to remove blocks of compassion, how small actions can lead to powerful change, and what it really looks like to live in alignment with your values.
Whether you're plant-based, plant-curious, or simply someone who wants to live with more intention, this conversation will leave you feeling empowered, grounded, and inspired. So let's dive in. Hi, Colleen. Welcome to the Plant Powered People podcast.
Thank you. I love alliteration so much. Well done on the title.
Thank you. So do I. Congratulations on your new book. You open it by saying your goal was to never be vegan, but to be compassionate. And that really resonated with me because as someone who's utilitarian and strives to do the least amount of harm possible in the world, rather than think about perfectionism or be a perfectionist, perfect vegan, that's how I live my life. Can you talk about more of this distinction that you and how you live your life and like what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the day I called my husband to tell him this revelation that I had when I was reading the book called Slaughterhouse. And it was a book that was the thing that kind of woke me up completely. I was vegetarian at that time, and I was vegetarian for the animals. And I read this book, and it was an investigative journalist who went and was basically investigating slaughterhouses. Well, she was part of a whistleblower that was one particular slaughterhouse, but she wanted to talk to slaughterhouse workers in every slaughterhouse so that people didn't accuse that one slaughterhouse of being a bad apple. And so she asked the same questions to all these slaughterhouse workers, and they all had the same answers. And what really struck me was that I was contributing not just to animal cruelty, but to a culture of violence. And it was just like a weight had just like, on one hand, it hit me over the head so hard and was painful. On the other hand, it was like a weight was lifted because all the things I believed about who I was and what I cared about were challenged reading this book that made me realize I'm contributing to the cruelty I don't want to contribute to. And so when I called David and said, I remember I was in LA, this was in 1999. And I remember saying, he knew I was reading this book. I was in tears. I'm vegan. Like I was like, I guess I'm this thing called vegan because it's this shortcut, this name we have, this word we have for this thing. But what's bigger than this word is the whole point, which is I don't want to be part of this cruelty. I don't want to be part of this violence. I want to live compassionately. And that has always been why I became vegan, right? So vegan is the effect of it. Vegan is the means to the end. It is not the end. And so that's what I mean when I say that. Like I still say it to this day. And for me, my little shortcut is I didn't become vegan as much as I removed the blocks to the compassion that was always inside of me. The problem with language is that words are hard and language is difficult. And we have this one word that kind of encapsulates it. But the way it gets defined and used, and I'll say wielded by some people, by some vegans, doesn't reflect that. What it reflects is some kind of stamp or badge or, goal that says, now I've done the thing. I've reached the goal. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like that's the means to the goal. That's not the goal. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love how in your book you describe becoming vegan as removing the blocks to compassion. That's so powerful. And throughout your book, you guide readers through weekly practices that help them reconnect with that innate sense of empathy. Can you talk about what those blocks looked like for you personally and how recognizing and removing them shifted the way that you lived your life?
Mm, yeah, thanks. And the reason I talk about it like that is because I think we all have the compassion. It's just all this muck that's surrounding it. And so, what's the muck? The muck is the same for all of us. The muck was the same for me when I was the kid who loved animals, didn't want to hurt them, intervened when I could, and then was being fed animals, you know, by my family, not because they wanted to hurt me or mock me or trick me, but because that's what they knew. And so status quo plays a huge part in all of us, kind of covering up that compassion. It's the norm. It's what we do. It's part of all of our social engagement. It's part of our rituals. It's part of our holidays. It's part of our religions. It's part of our family. It's part of our culture. It's integrated with so many aspects of who we are socially and culturally. And so that's a lot of it. And then add on that, kind of personality and not wanting to stand out from the crowd, not wanting to call attention to yourself, and then there's all these misconceptions around the nutrition and around the necessity or the alleged necessity of consuming animal products. So I was, caught in all of that, and I've always been someone who questioned things. I always have been. I wonder how much that plays a role in the people, I'd be so curious to know more personality traits about people who kind of do make this shift, right? So, it's all of it. And we all kind of struggle with those things. It just comes to a point, I think, for those of us who are willing to open our eyes, just kind of willing to look and bear witness and read something or talk to someone and be open enough. It depends on what that thing is for people, but that becomes more important than any of those other things, right? Like reflecting my compassion became more important than worrying about if I was going to have the perfect meal at a work event or if someone was going to make fun of me for not, for not eating animals or I'm not going to get enough protein. I'm going to hear that. So yeah, you get to a point where you just say, what's more important and what kind of tips that balance?
You have dedicated your life to help people create meaningful and lasting change for a long time. So I imagine a lot of thought went into this concept of a year of compassion. Can you share how and why you were encouraging people to take this approach? And why did you decide on a weekly structure instead of a daily one? Like, do you think that psychologically this time frame is easier for us to process making changes?
Yeah. So, when I wrote the 30-day vegan challenge, that's a very dedicated length of time to a very specific thing that says, I'm going to hold your hand through this 30-day period. And through that time, I'm going to help you shift habits and create new foundations while you're removing some other ones. Right. And so it's very specific. When it comes to kind of larger, deeper, more nuanced actions like, figuring out how you're going to discard things responsibly, figuring out how to compost, figuring out where you can buy things that are, don't have plastic packaging, right? That takes a little bit longer than just, okay, for 30 days, we're going to guide you through not consuming animals and animal products for those 30 days, right? So that does make a difference. And I want it to be really doable for people because I did think about a 30-day challenge for this, but the structure doesn't work. That doesn't work for the reasons I just said. And then, one of my early books that's out of print now, but it's just still close to a lot of people who have it, is The Vegan's Daily Companion. And that was 365 days of living compassionately, living sustainably, what have you. And a lot of it was kind of mind shifts and inspiration, which is doable for a daily book. I can give you inspiration and kind of ways to think about things and kind of, quotes and mottos and little takeaways for, each day. But to ask people to do something that's, kind of a real shift in the way they're living their lives, to ask them to take an action every day, like that would be overwhelming. So what I really like about the structure of the year is that each, and people can do it for the year. Most likely people are going to kind of pick and choose which things they want to do. But the idea is that it gives you the space and it gives you the time to do the research, to contemplate, the first chapter is take the week to do a waste audit or a food audit. So you can actually start observing how much waste you create in what categories or how much, meat, dairy, and eggs you eat. And so it gives you the data to be able to then start making changes. So I just think it's a much more reasonable structure than doing it daily or even in this 30-day period.
I love the way that you structured a year of compassion as someone who has like a sense of chronic overwhelm. And I want to do all the things. I want to read all the things. I want to integrate all the things. I do desperately, but it can be very overwhelming. And in your book, A Year of Compassion, a lot of your chapters, so each chapter is a week, right? And so like you go to the week number and a lot of these chapters are just a couple pages. Like they're not overwhelming. Anyone can fit that in at some point in their week. And more than that, if you are taking it slowly week by week, you have the space not only to like read and absorb the information pretty easily, but also to start integrating. And I think that is really powerful. It gives these things that can feel quite burdensome, and it takes that away and gives enough space to step in feeling a lot more confident. And you can't really get behind with this book. If you do, it takes you
Mhm.
20 minutes to catch up on 6 weeks of it. So I really love how you did that. What makes an action impactful to you, and how did you choose which ones were the most inspiring and impactful to include in this process?
That's a really good question. Thanks for asking that. It's the first time I've gotten that question because I really have been emphasizing when I talk about the content of this book that it's not just about all the things, it's about the impactful things. And I have to give one of those really annoying answers, which is it really depends on what the topic is because there's different ways to measure impact. And so there's not just one way, but what I do try to explain in the chapters, in each chapter is why this particular one is the most impactful. And I say in the beginning of the book, which I think you're getting at, you could do 100 things. A lot of these books are 101 ways to do this and 100 ways to 500 ways to save the planet. And like you can do 500 things, but they're not all going to have the same impact. So one of the things, for instance, when it came to consumption of animal products, the second chapter, which is eat less meat. And I say that very intentionally because, I say in that chapter, like, if you're measuring suffering, if you're asking the animals, like, what's the amount of animal products we should have that helps them, the answer is zero. Like, there's no, like, the measurement for that and the impact, like, if you want to just not hurt animals, like, in terms of how, your food consumption, then zero is the amount of animal products we should be eating. But if you're someone who's a little less inclined toward that and you're like, I can't do that yet, but I'm really concerned about the environment and I'm an environmentalist. Okay, well then let's look at the different ways you can measure the impact of meat consumption and dairy and egg consumption. Let's look at those impacts. Okay, what are those measurements? Water use, land use, greenhouse gas emissions, right? So depending on what you're measuring, cruelty, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water use, et cetera, you're going to kind of get a different, at least start. And so, a different way to start. And so with that, when I say, look, if you want to measure it by land and water use and greenhouse gas emissions, then when we're looking at meat consumption, start with beef, start with lamb. These are the two biggest culprits when it comes to the highest amount of negative impact that we have on land use and water use, et cetera. So that's kind of an example for that. And that kind of goes down the line, so each one just kind of has a different way to measure it. But the idea, and I was very selective in the ones that I chose in this book to say, these are the biggest ones. Now, some of them have subcategories, right? Food waste is a massive problem, both in terms of cost, in terms of landfills, in terms of methane gas and greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of, just, water use, food use, resource use. And so, there's several chapters about how to kind of reduce food waste. And, so it's kind of separating some of the specifics out for people. But yeah, I don't know. It really depended on what the topic was. But the point is that these are the most impactful things in terms of zero waste, sustainability, animal cruelty, and our health.
You were actually on our podcast in our earlier days, episode 12, season 1 to be exact, and we talked the whole episode about living in zero waste. So let's revisit that topic because I'm sure a lot has happened in those past 6 years, and I want to know how your journey in zero waste living has been, and are you continuously auditing your personal habits to make changes?
Yes, yes, and yes. So, of course, they've evolved, and some of the evolution in my zero waste journey has been altered because there's more resources out there to account for the things that I care about. So, when I think we talked, gosh, that long ago, there wasn't the service that's called Ridwell, which is rolling out in more and more cities across the country, but not everywhere right now, even though TerraCycle is still around, and I'll explain what these two are. Basically, these fill the gaps in terms of the packaging mostly that we can and cannot recycle. But Ridwell takes it to another level because TerraCycle does too. It's basically, they're filling in the gaps and saying, like, all the things that you can't or won't recycle or that can't be recycled, like literally chemically and mechanically recycled, right? Turning glass back into glass or aluminum into a different product. If you're not going to do that, you don't have a service to do that, we'll take care of that for you. Ridwell also, clothes and batteries and light bulbs and Christmas decorations, they have a different featured category and they come and they pick them up at your house. Like, that's been huge because even though I still, and my husband still, we still shop as zero waste as possible, meaning as plastic free as possible. We still go to our bulk store. We still get everything in jars and all of that. There are some things, there is plastic that winds up in our house, whether it's soft, pliable plastic or kind of multi-layer plastic. I make tofu from scratch, but I eat so much tofu that I can't keep up. So we do buy, tofu from Trader Joe's. And you know what? I'm able to put that plastic, multi-layer plastic in the Ridwell bag that they come and pick up and they properly recycle because my city recycling won't do that, right? So some of that's evolved in that way where I've been able to say, I'm still not like overdoing it, but at least feel a little better that I'm able to at least responsibly discard that. So that's one way it's evolved. For the most part, though, it has remained something I'm really passionate about. The thing that I would say zero waste has really evolved for me in is that I'm using that as kind of a catch-all term for sustainable living. And it's just, again, language is so limiting. It's just difficult. The word sustainable is really tricky. I find it really wonky. I find it really academic, oriented. Zero waste can scare people because it sounds like, it is about this perfection. So, but for me, the real evolution in terms of my own lens through sustainability has shifted substantially. And we may or may not talk about kind of rewilding and native plants and that kind of thing. But there's been such a huge shift in that regard. That's super exciting. So yeah, I'm super excited about it still, and I'm trying to empower people in the book. And as we talked about, especially food waste, I mean, it's just one of those things that I know that not everybody can compost, and not everybody wants to, and not everybody has compost options. But there's a lot we can do in our own kitchens and refrigerators to like reduce at least the things that we're throwing away. So I'm still excited about it. It just keeps evolving.
For someone who maybe hasn't thought much about zero waste or even like super sustainable living before, can you share some ideas for what they can incorporate into their own year of compassion?
Yeah, I always want to kind of give a foundational answer because I want people to have a definition that works for them so that when they're at the crossroads where they have to make a decision about something, they have some kind of question to ask themselves so that there's a guide for themselves. And the thing that resonated with me when I first started this journey and still resonates with me is the concept of responsibility and value. And so it just kind of, for me, frames the concept in a way that says, before I buy an item, asking myself the question, like, am I going to value this? Was value put into this item? Meaning, how is it made and what are the materials? Can I be responsible for it after it's at the end of its life? Meaning, will it compost? Meaning, will it be properly recycled? So for me, it's about value and responsibility. And that really does help change the decision you make when you need to bring something into your life, because you might say, no, that wasn't made in a way that reflects my values, and I don't think it will have value. Can I borrow it? Can I rent it? Can I make it? Right. So we're just kind of compelled to go down a different road rather than just, I want that, I need that, where is it? And so value and responsibility are the frames that I would encourage people to kind of think about as they're bringing things into their lives and how they discard them. So, plastic is a great example, but plastic isn't evil in and of itself, in that it's not waste until we actually discard of it irresponsibly, right? So, it's not waste until it winds up in the ocean. It's not waste until it winds up in a landfill. But we do need plastic in all of the ways in our lives because of medical reasons, building. I mean, there's so many things, right? But where can we in our own lives reduce unnecessary waste? And so that's one of the things I talk about in the book. And that chapter specifically is unnecessary waste, right? Like where can we focus on that? Food waste we kind of touched on a little bit. Zero waste, I mean, sustainability, when we're talking about transportation, some of the things that are really important in terms of how we can live most sustainably when it comes to, how we live and how we drive they're not sexy. Like, it's like, getting a heat pump for instead of your furnace when you're renovating, if you're able to do that, if your furnace conks out, how can you do something better? Solar panels, I would say all these renewable energies, I know they're not really sexy, but they are more affordable than ever before. And that includes electric vehicles. And they're going to keep getting more affordable. And that's really, really, really exciting because there was a time when this wasn't, and it felt really overwhelming for people who wanted to be able to heat or cool their home with renewable energies, but they couldn't afford it. So I would just encourage people to, if you looked 5 years ago for an electric vehicle or for solar panels or whatever, I would invite you to look again because you might be surprised. There's also, there are federal right now still tax credits. There are often state credits. So whatever you were interested in a few years ago that there wasn't a resource for, go look again now because there may very well be. And so some of this does require a little bit of work on our part, but I'm trying to make it easy for people by including it in the book.
Since food scraps are something that we all encounter probably daily, you say that food scraps aren't waste until we stop taking responsibility for them. In the same way that you say, plastic is not waste. All different things. It's not waste until we stop taking responsibility for it. Can you give some tips for how people can take responsibility for their food scraps that they have when they're cooking?
Sure. Oh God, I get really excited about the food waste thing because there's so many ways, there's so many ways we can do it. I mean, some of it is just kind of changing the way we look at the food. I mean, and seeing it as food, like literally seeing it as food as opposed to seeing it as scraps, waste, right? It's hard because even the language we use, they're pretty negative. But some of it is really just kind of valuing and honoring the food that we're eating and seeing food as, you know, as a precious resource that it is. We are in a time of consumption and overconsumption, and we're in a time of abundance. I know not everybody in the world is experiencing that right now, but for most of us, we're experiencing abundance. So again, shifting our thinking, I think really then will shift our behavior. So for instance, if you have a lemon, you need a lemon. Let's say you need lemon juice for one of Toni and Michelle's wonderful recipes. You need a lemon, you need lemon juice. Before you squeeze that lemon, take that pulp, take the zest off and use it in another recipe or in that recipe, freeze it, put it in the refrigerator. That zest to me is like gold. Lemon zest or citrus, any kind of citrus zest is like gold. I literally just had a tofu scramble and I never make a tofu scramble without putting lemon zest in it. So zest that lemon first and use that zest. Then squeeze the lemon. Then that peel can be put in, vinegar, in a bottle, and that could be part of a citrus vinegar cleaner. Like that doesn't require a lot of time. And then eventually that rind is just going to lose its potency. And so you can compost it in all the ways you can responsibly discard, bury it, compost it, learn to compost yourself, put it in your city's compost, what have you. That's just one example. Same thing with all of the peels and, how can you reuse it? How can you value that, what we would call a scrap, before it really becomes a scrap? I mean, the easiest one is to make vegetable stock. There should be no world in which you don't take all of that value out of your scraps before before you discard it completely. So make vegetable stock. Easiest thing to do in the pressure cooker with some peppercorns, some spices, some herbs, whatever you want, some water. You can just do it on the stovetop. And so you see what I mean? Like, how do we get the value out of all of the things that we're using? And then with products, I would say for people to really educate themselves, I have a whole chapter specifically on what we know is one of the main causes of food waste, which is the sell-by dates. There's such a misconception about sell-by dates. I was at my sister's house a few months ago, and she was just looking at food labels and looking at that the sell-by date had passed and was just throwing them in the garbage. And I had to tell her that, there's no government mandate about what that means. It doesn't mean anything. It's just the manufacturer's suggested freshness date. And so there are a lot of people who are trying to change the laws around that so that people don't get so confused, because people think they're going to get sick or get food poisoning. But that is not where food poisoning comes from, not because your peanut butter, was 2 days past the sell-by date. So educate yourself on that. I educate you in the book. So those are just a couple things. But again, it's looking through that lens of value. How can I get as much value out of this before I turn it into waste?
Colleen, I will say that personally, I love that this podcast reaches lots of people and helps inspire lots of people. But I also see over the years how it has inspired and changed me. And in an earlier season, we brought you on specifically to talk about composting. And I remember in that episode, I talked about how I used to have a bunny, adopted a bunny, and pancakes. Pancakes, my bunny would eat a lot of my food scraps. And the bunny was no longer alive, so I didn't know what to do with these food scraps. I didn't have a yard for a compost. I hadn't set one up. And then the evolution of that is then they invented these electric composters. I tried that for a while. And then last year, I started my own backyard compost. And it was the most beautiful, satisfying thing in the world to be able to take my food scraps. And like, I wanted scraps to feed into my compost and see them transform into this fluffy, dark soil that I could then put in my garden and grow more things. It was so satisfying. And then around the same time, our city in Sacramento started having a compost option. So we have, the green bin that we could then put scraps in, which has been really nice. And now today I'm living in an apartment complex. And so I have the city's green bin. And every time I go to put my food scraps in it, I see plastic bags in there. Like some people here don't know how to use the compost system. And this is both a reminder to myself to have them send a community-wide email, like letting people know how to use the compost bin. But also just seeing how I thought composting was something I'd want to do one day, but that it was intimidating and I would never get there. And here I am, like being a super passionate composter. And it started with the conversations that we had with you years ago on this podcast. So thank you. Thank you.
Also, Michelle, I'd like to know, which I think I said back on that podcast episode, which is I used to throw my food scraps in the green waste bin anyway. I feel like even if they, Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, even if they don't specifically say you can, it's all compostable.
You mean in the green bin for a city?
Yeah.
For the compost that they're going to make a compost? Yeah, any food scraps are accepted.
Awesome. Our food choices are important to consider when striving to live more compassionately. What does eating by color mean, and why is it a simple but powerful approach to nutrition?
I love talking about this too, because again, I think there's a lot of information out there, some of which is a bunch of bunk, some of which is just, I mean, people are so confused. They hear different things, especially now with access to so much information. There's so many theories. There's so many theories about what we're supposed to eat and obsessing over single nutrients. This is when you know we're in, a very privileged time in the world, in history, when we can obsess over these kinds of things. There was a time people they just couldn't even think about where they were going to get their next meal from. And like people obsess over, I don't know. It's so interesting to me. I think the concept of eating by color just simplifies it, because what you're going to wind up doing if color is your guide is you're just going to be increasing the amount of all of the nutrient rich vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and all of it through the plants, through the vegetables, the fruits, the nuts, the seeds, the beans, the mushrooms, the herbs, the spices, all of it, herbs and spices included. And you just don't have to get obsessive about, diet fads and conflicting nutritional advice. So that's why I think it's really important just to give just a one lens through which to look when you're making a decision about what to eat. And then it's just fun. It's just beautiful. It's just flavorful. I mean, the plants are where the flavors are. Like, that's what's so exciting. And then the bottom line is these are all of the foods that play such a huge role in our wellness, in our nutrition. I mean, literally cancer prevention and cell damage prevention and decreased cholesterol levels. And I mean, there's so many reasons why just eating by color, and I don't mean colorful packaging for potato chips. I mean, literally like the plants. It's just a really fun and effective, and I think really kind of simple way to kind of answer the question of like, what's the healthiest way to eat by color?
I also wanted to note that I do know that right now people are super concerned about food costs. Although there is plenty of food out there for people to eat, it can be stressful to think about how much it costs and how much of it you can buy. But there are so many options available at really accessible places like Dollar Tree, Walmart that are a bang for your buck. I know nutritionfacts.org has a guide on something similar where they show different plants, how much they cost, and how much nutrition you get. So it is like a bang for your buck article. And so this can apply to anybody, even if you are budget conscious and you're concerned. And when you're looking at food costs specifically, often what you're getting for prepackaged single meals is going to be a much bigger investment than if you were to buy groceries for the week and think about your food at price per meal instead of this one meal and how much or how low you can keep this one meal. It requires a little bit of effort, but you can really get a lot of groceries for the week and reuse them, like with potatoes and with celery and a bag of onions and things like that. They stretch really far, especially when it comes to a bag of dried beans, a bag of brown rice, and things like that.
100%. I mean, gosh, there's so much. And one of the things I say, it's kind of just almost in passing in the chapter, there's a chapter specifically on eat affordable, not cheap foods. One of the things I say is, a lot of us do this. A lot of us do this where we say, I have to go to the grocery store because I have nothing in the house. We probably have something in the house. We could put off shopping. I love that challenge. I try to get David to do it. He's good sometimes, but not all the time. He comes home with tofu and he gets in trouble. And he's like, what husband gets in trouble for bringing tofu home? And I say, you're not in trouble. I just have other things we can eat. We don't need it today. So we have pastas and rice and grains and beans. We have so many things in the house. We'd be fine if we didn't go to the store probably for a good month. Maybe in terms of having fresh vegetables, we wouldn't have that every single, day as we're going through the things, so maybe get a couple of those staples. The point is, it's really just a matter of like us, again, self-honesty, I think is a big part of this, and actually looking and seeing like, what do you have? What are you doing out of convenience and what are you doing out of necessity and what are you not looking that you might have? And what are you not doing because you don't think you could be creative? Like, so get creative, trust yourself, look at what you have in the cupboard and see what kinds of things you can make. Use your cookbooks. There's plenty of resources out there to say, okay, I have this, and I have that, right? What can I make with that as opposed to shopping because we have a particular recipe we're shopping for. So yeah, there's lots of ways to exercise eating affordably at this time and always.
Love it. Toni and I recently got a shared Costco membership, and I was not thinking of it at all, really too much for food, but I just went there for the first time in years recently, and I was blown away by the organic produce that they had. Like a big, huge container of blueberries, $5. Huge thing of spinach that's usually like $6, $3. Like I was blown away. And at first I went through Costco being like, I'm not going to come back here. This is like too much going to get me buying things that I don't need. But once I went through the produce department, I was like, well, never mind. I will be back just specifically for spinach and blueberries if that's all it is. And then it's not always like this in Costco because sometimes they'll have like apples that each apple is individually wrapped. But if you're getting a bigger package of blueberries that does come in a plastic shell, it's better than getting 4 little plastic shells of blueberries that just ends up being even more packaging, not to mention like 4 times as expensive. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I know Toni has always nudged me and through our shared work projects to explore all the different grocery stores and find what's most affordable at different ones. But this was the most blatant example that I've seen of the price differential for things that are usually really expensive. Okay, Colleen, what are some of your favorite go-to meals that hit all the plant-based markers of comfort and nutrition and ease that you love?
Do you know that it's the hardest question I get? Do you know that?
You're like, everything.
It's
Ask
just
me
so
different day,
hard.
different moment, right?
Yeah, well, yes, and I it's gosh. So I mean, so I can answer that objectively, I can answer that subjectively. I'll answer it objectively because I eat pretty simply. But I guess it's the same answer because it really would be kind of that foundation of beans. I mean, beans are just the most wonderful foods in terms of just nutrition and cost and flavor and versatility. Definitely, just kind of vegetables. I mean, I just eat a lot of vegetables, tofu, for sure. And so again, tofu scrambles, tofu, salads, that kind of thing. One of the meals I would say that I think is it's fun because I don't think a lot of people cook with it is polenta. So one of my go-to meals. So we're having a couple come over tomorrow night, some friends of ours coming over tomorrow night, and I decided I wanted to make it Italian. And I could do pasta. I'm not a huge pasta lover, but I could do pasta, but I don't want to do pasta. I always feel like also if I made pasta for people who came over for dinner, I don't know, it feels like, I should be 20 years old and not a really good cook if I'm doing that. It's a terrible bias against pasta, which is ridiculous. But polenta is kind of my go-to grain for a quick meal. It's delicious, it's easy, it's versatile, and it's nutritious, and it's also a really good basis for anything you want to put on top of it. So I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow night yet. It's one of the things I'm going to figure out when we get off the call. But I would probably do something like, some kind of air fried or roasted vegetables on top of a nice plate of creamy polenta. And polenta is just one of the things people, I don't think they go reach for it. They tend to, if they have polenta, I mean, if you're in Italy, you know what I'm talking about. You get the proper polenta. But if you're in the United States, you probably go to the grocery store and get that tube of, polenta, which is, it's just not it's just not great. It's just not great. So getting coarse cornmeal and making that from scratch and happy to send anybody a recipe who wants it. It's the easiest thing to do. So those kinds of things where you can build from some kind of foundation and then just pile on as many healthy foods as possible. So I know I'm not giving like a really sexy answer, but just, nutrient dense, color, flavor, use your spices, use your herbs. Don't be shy about that. And, I think if you're kind of just tuned a little bit toward what might be selling at a local farm stand or farmer's market, you'll also be eating a bit more in season. And that's something I really recommend people do too.
I think it's funny that you say that it's like a college student feeding you pasta because it's my dream. If I'm a dinner guest at someone's house and they served me pasta, I would be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm such a big pasta lover. Also, the last time you came over for dinner, actually, you and David and Michelle and our friend Chen were over and we had a pizza. Like we just gave you pizza.
God,
That's like
but
the
it was
most
so fun.
college thing ever.
It was like make your own pizza, and we all designed our own. That was so fun, Toni. I
Oh
love
yeah, no, pizza's totally different. No, that was amazing. I'm so glad you didn't say like last time I went to your house you made pasta because I would have felt really bad.
it.
No, I want that.
I know, but if I said that I don't love pasta and that I feel like it's a 20-year-old college food and you made it for me, then I would feel really bad having said that. But luckily, you made pizza. So,
Oh, yes. Oh,
no,
right, right, right.
next
That
time
would have
you
been
come,
funny.
I'm making pasta for you. So that's really good to know. And David loves making pasta dishes. Like he loves making pasta sauces. And they are really pasta, like there's so many pastas. When I'm in Italy, I love pasta. And there's so many pastas depending on what region you're in. In Italy, it's just at home. I don't know. I guess I feel like I'd rather make something that it's just more nutrient dense and that's what I do. But pasta, can be nutrient dense, obviously using whole wheat, but also just piling on the vegetables as much as possible. But yeah, that's just me.
Let's switch gears and talk about compassion and action over our everyday lives. You mentioned fostering or helping injured animals. What advice do you have for people who want to be helpful but don't have a lot of time, they don't have physical space or financial resources to take in an animal in need? So, what else can they be doing?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. So if we're talking about kind of dogs and cats and rabbits, kind of domesticated animals, there are a lot of things we can do. Obviously, we can support organizations who have foster networks. I mean, really look into your local, rescue networks. They always need help in so many different capacities. So even if you can't be the one to foster, there are a lot of things that you can do to support other people who are fostering, even if you're buying food or beds or paying for vet visits. I mean, there's so many ways that way. Other ways in terms of just kind of being on the lookout for, other members of our society, other non-human members of our society. One of the things I talk about is keeping, kind of a stash in your car, in your garage, or whatever's convenient of a leash, of a towel, of, maybe thick gloves, a blanket, even a box, possibly, so that you could be at the ready for any animal you encounter who might need support. It might wind up being a wild animal as well, but it could be a dog or a cat. Having in your phone the number for rescue organizations, especially 24/7, wildlife hotlines or SPCAs. If you're not able to take an animal to an SPCA that you find, maybe you can, keep them at your house overnight and then bring them to the shelter the next day. But having those numbers, knowing that, orienting to the fact that we might encounter someone who needs our help throughout any day, just by being prepared is just a really, really helpful thing. Because whenever, I don't know, I've encountered this, you don't know who to call, you don't know what to do, you panic, you're freaking out. And that goes for when you're traveling as well. If you're traveling and, you encounter a stray dog or a cat or someone who looks hungry and you don't know what to do, having the phone number of local rescue organizations in that area is just going to make it so much easier for you to intervene and help than feeling powerless and feeling like there's nothing you can do. So those are a couple things you can do for, kind of for dogs and cats. And then for wildlife, I mean, there's a lot we can do. I could talk about that forever. So I'll just leave it at the dogs and cats for now and I'll let you ask the question.
I so Paul and I have been fostering one dog per year since the pandemic. So we foster failed Eddie, and then we had Marie, Carol, Michelle, and Isaac. And now that Eddie is a little bit older, I And also it's hard. We foster pit bull puppies. It's tough to have a puppy in the house. So now that Eddie's older and I just am not as interested in having a puppy, we were looking into other options. And one option that really stands out is walking dogs at the shelter. It's something that's free to you. It doesn't require the commitment of bringing an animal into your home, and it's mutually beneficial. It gets them out of the shelter, which is quite stressful for them, and it gets you out in the fresh air. You can do a doggy date. You could take them to get a pup cup. You could there's so many things you could do with the dog, and they'll have a little adopt me bandana. So anyone who sees this dog knows that they're up for adoption and you can hype them up. And it just seems like a really great program for someone who wants to be helpful but has limited time, limited resources, and may want some exercise and fresh air.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. I love it. I love it. And and then just extending that to, I'm going to mention cats. Extending that to other volunteer opportunities. Obviously there's a million things you can do that way, but I hear what you're saying, because that's a way for you to kind of tick the box of, I need some exercise. I want to get outside. I haven't walked today and I want to help a dog. There are cat cafes. Look for the nonprofit ones where you can also go get a cup of coffee and also cuddle with a cat at the same time. So you're socializing the cat. So you can tick those two boxes, and it counts as volunteering, but it also counts as you just kind of, hanging out, drinking a cup of coffee and doing what you need to do as well. So yeah, just be creative. And I love that idea. I think there's even more and more organizations popping up when people travel. They could also go to a rescue and go walk a dog. When they're traveling, having an opportunity like that, that's pretty cool.
That's so funny you mentioned that, because the only person I know who's like that is my mother-in-law, Jolene. She is the biggest animal lover. Now that she's retired, she's a full-time volunteer at her local animal shelter and has been for decades. And she was the only person. But then we had a friend who went on their honeymoon, and we were like, "Oh, how was your honeymoon?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we went and walked dogs at this shelter." And I was like, "That's what you did on your honeymoon?" So I just thought that was a really cute, clever idea, and it's funny that you mention it.
Love
Yeah,
it.
I know I think in Maui, there's a place where you can bring a dog out for a day, kind of like you were describing, Tony, and they give a little adopt me bandana, and you can take them out on the beach or wherever and give them a day experience. It's so hard for dogs in shelters. Walking dogs at animal shelters was one of my first volunteer things that I did when I was younger growing up. And then in college, I did that as well in Cleveland at their local SPCA. And when I would take a dog out of their kennel to go on a walk, these dogs had to pee so badly that they hold it. And as soon as I opened the kennel door before we were even outside, they would pee on the ground, inside. So they're holding it, they're potty trained, and then they couldn't even make it outside. So there's really, depending on where you live, there might be a super need for volunteers where you're able to make a really big impact on these animals' lives. And then also, if you are talking about this with people, with your friend groups and stuff, you're going to become known as this person who cares about animals, and you will get the call. This past year, I got a call from my friend Lauren, who said they had, I guess, some rat traps or mice traps in their outer attic of this attachment to their house, and a rat had gotten caught in it but was alive, was kind of dangling by their arm. And Lauren called me and they were like, "Michelle, what do we do about this?" And I'm like, "Hold on, I'll come, I'll bring a box," and just kind of unhooked the rat from the trap, put the rat in the box, and then took him to a river and released him. But there's a few simple things here. One, you'll get the call to help, and then just being available and trying to figure out what to do, or even just being that sound space where you can be like, "Let me find the animal rescue to call or help," is huge. And then also in your own home or space, just taking care to not use things like glue traps or snap traps, and instead look for humane mouse traps or things like that. That prevents the problem from the beginning in your own space.
I actually remember I was at Colleen's house, and I was like, Colleen, can I tell a story?
Yeah.
I was house sitting for Colleen, and she was the nicest rat trapper of all time. They were eating delicious food, and she
Colleen,
got
didn't
these.
you put Miyoko's cheese in there?
Yes, she had high quality cheeses for these rats,
Vegan
and she was
cheese.
humanely trapping them. And I just thought, wow, this is like next level kindness to these like animals, living creatures who people usually mistreat very, very harshly.
Well, next level is, yeah, there's a lot to ask my house sitter to ask them to release the rats and check the traps. That was a lot to ask. I do know that. There is a chapter in the book called Humane Critter Control. So, how do you manage uninvited critters? And I am speaking from experience, and Toni is a testament to that, of how we can, do it humanely. But, what's more important than, okay, well, it's not more important, but what the whole point, the reason they're in your house is because there's an access point. So we have to close the access points. And while you're figuring out where the access points are, trapping them humanely, releasing them on your property, because it's okay. They live on your, like, they are, native to your yard and to your neighborhood. So, and anyone, I have to say this out loud, anyone who, with best intentions, calls anyone who advertises themselves as humane trappers who will release them elsewhere, they are lying to you. It is illegal to relocate a wild animal other than, to a place other than where they were found. So what they're doing is they're gassing them, they're killing them. And so the best thing you can do is find, people to work with who will do the live trapping, or you can do it yourself, but find people to work with to find the access points, to close up the areas in the attic or the basement or the, under the porch or wherever they're getting. And then once those areas are closed up, then it's not an issue anymore. But in the meantime, you just have to find a way to do it so that they're not, so that you're not hurting them. And I actually, in the book, talk about how to kind of differentiate between whether it's a rat or a squirrel or a raccoon or a mouse in your house, because there's different ways to respond depending on who's in your house.
Often it's not even that much more expensive. If it's more expensive at all, we had rats in our attic last year, and we called a lot of different humane, what is it called when you want them to identify the problem and close up the spaces that they're coming in through.
Yeah, there's a word for that. I know what you're talking about. But yeah, like,
So that's what they did. And just out of curiosity, I got a quote from like an exterminator, and it was the same price for them to come. And the guy came 3 times just to keep making sure that everything was solid. And I really appreciated it. The way he did it made it so that the rats could only leave. They couldn't come back. He put like a trap, not a trap door, like a door that only a one-way door.
yes.
And then kept going back to make sure that the things that he did, like put flour on the ground. I think it was flour, like some powder on the ground to see if there were any footsteps through it, to make sure that it was still undisturbed. And then we knew that the problem was solved. So it was the same price, and no animals were hurt, and they got to continue living. Like, we live near a river. Of course, we're going to have rodents. And it was just the kinder thing to do, and it didn't cost us anything more.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's the responsibility that we're talking about. We're all here together. We have to cohabitate. We have to not see them as intruders. We have to see ourselves as intruders, but we have to just see ourselves as inhabitants. Like, that's what this looks like. And the decisions that we make impact everybody around us, and we can make those impacts positive or we can make them negative. I mean, those are our choices. And so there's a lot we can do. It might take a little more time, what have you, because people want to just have them come in once and then that's it. They kill them, they're gone. But that's not, there are high costs to that, right? The cost of the animals, the cost of the environment, all the things. And any good exclusion, let's call it, I think that's maybe the word we were looking for. Any good exclusion service would also give you a guarantee. We had a warranty for 2 years, meaning that, like, if within 4 months that we found the rats, like, it took a while for this to work, but each time we kept hearing them, the company came back, looked again, found another hole, found another, way they were accessing. So, but that's just the right thing to do. And that's what we all say we want to do. It just might take a little longer, but doesn't have to. And it doesn't have to cost anything either, but it feels really good.
I think for people who feel like their individual actions don't matter, doing things like this, or even I have another story I can share, but it really will show you how much they do matter and how you feel inside when you're helping an individual, whether it's an animal or even a bug, an insect. Seeing an animal sort of be able to live that otherwise wouldn't have because of the action you took feels so good. My little one, Graham, he's 5. And right now we're living in an apartment and there's a pool here. And so we've been going out to the pool and Graham notices like a little bug or a bee that's like floating in the water and can't get out. And at first we thought that they were dead. They weren't moving anymore. And he was like, well, I just want to get him out. So there was this big dragonfly and we kind of got a leaf or a flip flop and scooped him out. And then he just like came back to life and was shaking for like 5 minutes and then flew away. And so now every day when Graham comes home, he wants to go over by the pool and see who's out there who needs to be rescued. And the other day there was a bee that was like kind of further in the pool and Graham was wearing a life vest. He went and he jumped into the pool, swam across to the bee, took my flip flop, lifted him out, and then we saw the bee fly away. And it's like so empowering, inspiring, and also like when you're taking these actions to help a creature, big or small, human, a non-human animal, an insect, and other people witness that, it's wild how much it will shift in them, how they see others, and then how they step up to help others. So these like ripples of compassion just do spread, and they spread fast and far and wide. And so it's exciting seeing that and how much of an impact you can make it as an individual. But Colleen, I'm wondering from you, because I know this is something that you hear all of the time from people who feel like, well, what I'm doing doesn't matter. My actions don't really matter. What else do you have to say to them?
Well, I mean, the story you just told is an answer to that. I mean, it matters to that bee. It matters to that flower who's going to be pollinated by that bee. It matters to, it matters to everybody. It matters to us. It matters to him. It's shaping him. It's shaping you. You're telling the story now. I mean, this idea that we don't have impact. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being too focused on what I'm seeing happen these days. But I just feel like everyone is so focused on what everybody else is doing wrong and what people are doing far, far away, what legislation may or may not be passing, what is happening or not happening in this, at the national park level. Like right in our own lives, in our own relationships, we have so much power and we keep giving it away. It's not to say that, things that happen nationally or globally aren't important. Of course they are, but there's only so much we can do at that level. But what we can do at our own level, literally look down at your feet. Look down at your feet, look around you, look at your house, look at your garden, look at your outdoor space, look at your balcony potential. Everything we do has an impact. You've heard me say this before. It's not that we, get to choose whether we make a difference. We get to choose only whether the difference we make is negative or positive. Like that's it. So every opportunity, every experience is an opportunity to do the right thing, to help someone, to be a model for someone else, to bring compassion into this world, to plant native flowers, to attract native bees, to not put netting up that birds are going to get caught in, to not use pesticides and herbicides so that we're not, killing off, just life in order to just preserve a lawn. There's so many things we can do. And I think if we just kind of looked inward a little bit more and looked downward and looked upward, like what we can see just around us and the relationships we have and the potential we have to inspire. We think that celebrities are the ones that people are looking at to get their models for living by. It's like literally their friends, their neighbors, their family, their clerk, the person who they talk to in the store today. Like that's the power we have. We're models all the time. And I think we just squander these opportunities because we say things like we don't have an impact, which I just obviously don't agree with. So sit down, take a look at, some of the things that you can do. And I think you'll be really surprised to see that you're going to get busy doing the things that need your help and support. You're not going to have time to complain about what everybody else isn't doing.
This, I think, is a beautiful place to end this episode. Colleen, I feel like we could have you on 100 more times, and I hope that we can do that. You have so much to share, and you have such a gift and a way of really inspiring people to tap into like themselves and parts of themselves that can evolve in a way that just is so in line with who they already are and with creating a kinder, more peaceful world. So thank you so much for all that you do. And I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of A Year of Compassion. Where else can people find you, connect with you, listen to your podcast, and more, Colleen?
So everybody can find me at joyfulvegan.com. I have to say I'm really excited by the writing platform I have now on Substack. So I really want to encourage everyone to subscribe over on Substack. I am posting articles several times a week, recipes, just lots of information and inspiration for living compassionately. So I'm really excited by that. So you can find the links off of joyfulvegan.com, but everything's over there at the website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on again to chat with us and keep us inspired to make small changes that are extremely impactful every single day. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Colleen. A quick reminder to check out our sponsors of this episode, Nutty Novelties and their delicious nut butters. You can use the code PLANT for 10% off your order at nuttynovelties.com. And Purity Woods, they have an age-defying night cream you can check out at puritywoods.com/plant-powered or use the code PLANT-POWERED at checkout.
Colleen is so brilliant and incredibly inspiring. We've been lucky enough to have her on the show 4 times now, which we will link those episodes in our show notes so you can go back and listen. And every time I'm completely inspired. As you heard, she has inspired Michelle to start composting. And even in this one, I feel like it's just an uplifting way to get us active and thinking and a little bit uncomfortable to move outside of the things that we normally do and to consider how our actions impact others. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I'm sure Michelle did as well.
Yeah, and I also have filmed some videos with Colleen specifically because I love how she communicates about things and it's so impactful. So we took specific topics and filmed her responses to each of them. They're very shareable, great sound bites. So I'll include that in the podcast landing page as well at plantpoweredpodcast.com. And if you know anyone who this episode would be interesting to or helpful for, please do share it. That would mean the world to us.
We also have our newsletter sign up at plantpoweredpodcast.com. So if you want regular updates of when we have new episodes or new recipes, we try not to blow you up, but we do send some good stuff. If you'd like to support this show, there are 2 things you can do. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We always love reading those. And if you have a few dollars to spare, you can support the show and help us create even more content at patreon.com/plantpoweredpeople.
Love you all so much, and we will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.